This program is provided by Universal Genesis.
Welcome, listener. Today we're embarking on a deep dive into a really unusual philosophical mystery.
It's a fascinating one.
It is. We're looking at the fundamental frameworks of human thought, the categories, specifically as defined by three absolute giants: Aristotle, Immanuel Kant, and G.W.F. Hegel.
Right. And these are, arguably the most influential systems in all of Western philosophy.
Yeah.
But our mission today isn't just to list them. We're looking at the math.
The math, exactly.
The real insight, the whole story is in their numerical choices. You have Aristotle with 10, Kant insisting on 12, and then Hegel with this structural 9.
That's right. You shared some incredible sources with us that analyze this exact progression, and our goal here is to explain why they chose those specific numbers, their argument being that these weren't just arbitrary counts. They were, calculated philosophical structures, deeply rooted in ancient symbolism and designed to define the very limits of what we can know.
It's such a remarkable piece of intellectual history. The shift from 10 to 12 and then down to 9, it tracks the entire evolution of German idealism. It's a story about, first, containing the explosion of human reason.
Sealing it off,
and then deliberately tearing that seal apart. The number itself actually determined the destiny of the entire philosophical system.
Okay, so let's unpack this whole numerical strategy. We should probably start at the beginning with the foundation Aristotle laid.
Right, so Aristotle gives us the first major systematic approach. He defines 10 categories: substance, quantity, quality, relation, place, time, position, having, acting, and being acted upon.
We've all heard that list, but what was his actual methodology? What were his categories really for?
And that is the crucial distinction we have to make right from the start. Aristotle's method was, it was essentially descriptive. He looked at the things we say about existing objects. He looked out at reality and just classified the fundamental ways of being that something could have.
So if I see a red ball, ball is the substance.
Right.
Red is the quality, and its size is the quantity. It's really a classification system.
Exactly. It was an organizational tool. Think of it like a vast conceptual shelf for organizing everything you observe in reality. But here's the problem, at least the one that Kant and later thinkers saw.
Okay.
Aristotle never gave a logical proof for why there had to be exactly 10. Could there be 11? Could there be 9?
It was an open system.
Precisely. And if the categories can be increased or reduced arbitrarily, then the rational mind is just free to expand infinitely, always searching for new ways of being.
And for Kant, that kind of freedom was dangerous.
Very dangerous. It risked restarting the dogmatic rationalism that he thought had plagued philosophy for centuries. This idea that pure reason alone could just construct metaphysical truth with no limits.
That's the critical threat, isn't it? If reason just runs wild trying to define the universe without any empirical limits, it falls into what he called antinomies, these unavoidable contradictions.
It leads directly to what he called the megalomania of reason. You had philosophers trying to touch the divine, to construct the worlds from scratch, all using just their minds. Kant wanted to put a stop to all of that. He needed a philosophical fortress.
So if 10 was too permeable, too open, Kant needed a truly unshakable boundary. He needed a number that was logically necessary, fixed, and crucially finite. He needed 12.
The necessity of 12 comes directly from Kant's strategic goal. He had to set an absolute, unshakable boundary for any possible experience.
And this boundary serves two purposes.
A twin purpose, exactly. It secures the limits of scientific knowledge, but at the same time, it makes space for religious faith and morality by just declaring metaphysics off limits to our theoretical reason. And for that system to hold, the number 12 had to be unavoidable.
So how did he prove it? Because unlike Aristotle, who looked outward at the world,
Kant looked inward.
right, inward at the machinery of the human mind itself.
He derived his 12 categories not from nature, but from the actual structure of human judgment. And he leaned very heavily on traditional logic for this, particularly the systems that were passed down through thinkers like Leibniz and Wolff.
Okay, let's break that formula down because this is really the technical heart of his entire philosophical revolution.
It is. The premise starts with this observation that all possible human judgments, the very act of thinking about the world, can be categorized along 4 main axes or perspectives.
Quantity, quality, relation, and modality.
Those are the 4, the broad ways we structure any thought. For example, quantity is about how much. One thing, many things, all things. Quality is about reality. Is it real? Is it not real? Is it limited?
Okay, so that gives us 4. Where does the 12 come from?
The 12 comes from the essential internal structure of those 4 axes. Kant argued that for any complete act of judgment, There absolutely have to be 3 phases of thought. Not 2, not 4. You need 3.
And these 3 phases are what?
They're generally defined as affirmation, negation, and then a synthesis or restriction of the two. It's the logical necessity of moving from a starting point, recognizing its opposite, and then combining or limiting them into a third concept.
Can you give us a concrete example? How do those 3 phases work inside one of the axes?
Sure. Let's take the axis of quantity. The 3 phases there are unity, which is the affirmation, a single concept. Then plurality, the negation, multiple concepts. And then totality, which is the synthesis.
The recognition of the many as part of a single whole.
Exactly. And if you remove totality, the system just breaks down. You're left with a pile of disparate parts.
Yeah.
And if you try to add a 4th phase, he argued it would just logically collapse back into one of the existing 3.
I see. So it's a self-contained minimal structure. So if we take the 4 necessary axes of thought and we multiply them by the 3 necessary phases of judgment.
The result is 12. 4 axes times 3 phases equals 12. This equation created the minimal closed system that Kant absolutely required.
It's a finite lattice for thought.
It is. It limited the degrees of freedom for reason. It effectively acted as the cap that stopped reason from generating these infinite, unsolvable metaphysical pseudo-problems.
So it's a mathematical and logical sealing device, perfectly engineered to contain the human mind. But, and this work is really interesting, we're moving beyond pure logic now. Kant wasn't just talking to mathematicians, he was speaking to a culture.
Yes.
What made the number 12 feel so stable and absolute to his 18th century audience?
This is where Kant moves from pure derivation to what you could call, well, symbolic manipulation. He chose a number that was already universally encoded in Western culture as a symbol of pleroma completeness, fullness, perfect order.
It had a built-in cultural stability.
Absolutely. Just think about how 12 structures our world. 12 months in the year, the 12 signs of the zodiac mapping the cosmos, the 12 hours of the day and night.
For centuries, 12 was the number used to define the rational, completed structure of the universe.
Right. It's often linked to the dodecahedron in Platonic geometry, which symbolized the outer shell of the cosmos itself.
And in the religious context he was trying to protect, you have the 12 apostles signaling the completion of a foundational covenant.
Exactly. So by choosing 12, Kant performed this brilliant philosophical maneuver. He was effectively saying, look, I have logically proved that reason has only 12 fundamental structures. And hey, incidentally, this number is the same one that symbolizes the completeness of the cosmos and of historical order.
So when his contemporaries saw the 12 categories, they didn't just see a formula. They instinctively felt that the system was closed, that it was finished and stable. It was a kind of cultural guarantee of his philosophical boundary.
It was what you might call a political theological optimal value. The stability of 12 guaranteed the finite limits of reason. It secured the realm of science, which is what we can know through experience,
While also
locking up the metaphysical realm, God, soul, freedom from rational assault, making sure that faith had its own protected space.
So Kant successfully sealed the box. But as history always shows, closures don't last very long in philosophy.
They do not. And then you have Hegel, who looks at Kant's beautifully sealed, static box of 12 and just declares it fundamentally insufficient. If Kant was about containment, Hegel's all about explosive expansion.
And this brings us to the most radical shift in the story, the transition from 12 to the structural 9.
Hegel just fundamentally denied the whole premise of a fixed number of categories. For him, concepts or categories, what he called Begriff, they aren't static tools for organizing things.
They're the result of movement.
They're the result of movement. They generate and self-develop through what he called dialectical necessity.
So if we were to actually try and count every single concept in his massive work, The Science of Logic, we'd be talking about hundreds of categories, wouldn't we?
Oh, yes. Depending on how finely you slice the development, you might find over 300. But counting them is sort of antithetical to his whole project. He was trying to define the infinite flow of thought, not create a static list.
Okay, so if that's the case, why do our sources point to the number 9 as the structural architecture?
Because while the flow itself is infinite, Hegel built a systematic structure to manage that flow. The entire science of logic is organized into 3 main sections: the logic of existence, the logic of essence, and the logic of concept.
And within each of those?
Within each of those 3 sections, the conceptual development happens through 3 major recurring developmental triads.
So 3 macro sections, each structured by 3 major internal movements.
Precisely. And that gives you 3 times 3, which is 9. This 9 is the structural scaffolding that contains the infinite movement. It's the framework, not the complete list of contents.
So if Kant used 12 to symbolize closing a system, how does 9 symbolize opening it? Regeneration, a dynamic boundary.
Symbolically, 9 holds this really unique position. It's the last of the single digits, right? It's the number right before the leap to 10, which signals a whole new order or dimension.
It's the peak of a cycle.
Always the peak, poised for regeneration. You even mentioned it, the 9 months of gestation. It's the boundary just before a new birth.
So where Kant's 12 creates a kind of static circle, a finished, perfect boundary, Hegel's 9 creates a spiral. One set of 9 generates the philosophical need for the next set, leading to this self-expansion of absolute spirit.
It's an engine for intellectual growth, and the real core of this shift lies in how they reverse the role of the number 3.
The triad, thesis, antithesis, synthesis, it's central to both systems, but they deploy it so differently.
In Kant's 12, the 4x3, the number 3 was essentially a break. It was used for sealing the system. It finalized a category and stopped any further movement. The third term, the synthesis or a limitation, it restricted reason.
And in Hegel's 9, the 3x3.
In Hegel's system, the synthesis or Aufhebung is an accelerator. It doesn't restrict the system at all. It generates a necessary contradiction that actually compels the system to move forward into a higher, richer concept. The third term is the moment of expansion.
This reversal of the function of 3 is the core methodological break in German idealism.
It is. The entire trajectory of modern philosophy hinges on whether the number 3 acts as a fence or as a springboard.
It's astonishing, and it really points back to this idea that these thinkers were not working in a philosophical vacuum. They were deeply steeped in the history of number symbolism. They understood that 12 and 9 had these profound ancient meanings.
They did. We're talking about traditions like Pythagoreanism, Neoplatonism, even aspects of Kabbalah. These were, common knowledge in the intellectual circles of the 18th and 19th centuries.
The sources are pretty clear that this was part of their educational foundation.
Absolutely. Hegel himself often referenced the idea that the Pythagoreans saw numbers not as just, ways to count things, but as metaphors for conceptual truths, the structural language of the world spirit.
So in that tradition, how did they define 12 and 9?
The Pythagorean view saw 12 as the number of cosmic perfection, the ultimate finished form. It represented a completed static universe, secured by boundaries.
A perfect fit for Kant's desire for closure and finality.
A perfect fit. And 9. 9 was seen as the number of dynamic transition, the extreme point of manifestation just before a transformation. It's the number that signals everything is about to break open and jump to a new level.
Which was the perfect symbolic fit for Hegel's theory of a constantly self-generating absolute spirit.
Exactly. So Kant used 12 as an intentional structural tool to close philosophy, to enforce his religious and scientific boundaries, essentially putting reason in a cage. And Hegel, fully aware of all this symbolism, used the 9 structure to reopen philosophy, to shatter those constraints and unleash reason as this infinite, self-developing force.
The numerical choice was the strategic choice. Kant used the cultural weight of 12 for stability. Hegel used the symbolic potential of 9 for revolution.
That's it.
So what does this whole numerical drama mean for you, the listener? We started with these complex texts, Aristotle's classification, Kant's derivation, Hegel's dialectic. And what we've discovered is that the difference between these massive thinkers, and really the entire trajectory of Western thought, came down to whether they chose a number that meant closed or open.
The profound insight here is that the history of Western knowledge really tracks this numerical progression. 10 was the open shelf of classification. 12 was the necessary sealed boundary for securing scientific truth and faith. And 9 was the complete, deliberate unleashing of reason as a self-generating, infinite movement.
The numbers tell the whole philosophical story.
They do. 12 closed the world, 9 opened it.
And this leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to consider. In the information age, you are constantly managing massive quantities of data. If Kant's 12 represents the limit of what we can know, a fixed and stable catalog, and Hegel's 9 represents constant dynamic expansion and transformation, which numerical structure best describes the knowledge system you interact with every day? Are you seeking the stability of 12 or the relentless generative motion of 9?
This program is provided by Universal Genesis.